All right. We're live. Yes. All the little lights are lit and all the little things are thinged. So far, so good. We're doing great. I hope you're doing well. I'm running a little behind. I've just spent the last couple hours talking about the Hobbit movies for Patreon, so I'm a little bit scattered. You'll have to bear with me as we get started. The one thing I wanted to point out, just one interesting thing why didn't that change my Stream Elements? You didn't change my title? Oh man, that sucks. Anyway, this is the writer's chat for December the 7th. December 7th. Not 11:30, the way it possibly says on your screen. I'll make sure that the video, when it's uploaded to YouTube, gets corrected, and I'll make sure it's fixed on Twitch as well. The thing I wanted to talk about, other than, hey, look, this technology is kind of hosing me, is that you will encounter all along your way, no matter what you're writing, no matter what you're making, you're going to find people who absolutely positively really, really need to give you their opinion about whatever you're doing and however you're doing it. Even if like they have no reason to give it to you, you will find human beings who just need you to know that what they think about what you're doing should be a factor in what you're doing. They'll tell you that you're working too hard, or that it's not right, or that you should be doing this instead of that, or you should be here and you should be there. And they'll give you some, I'm making huge air quotes here, very, very big air quotes, like dirigible size air quotes, advice they'll give you in order to suggest that here's why they think you should do it this way or do it that way, or why you're wrong for pursuing the thing you're doing to the degree you're doing it, because really, if you were a good, again, giant air quotes, good person, you'd be doing it their way. And really all they're looking for is somebody to just do what they say so that they can feel validated and heard. You, as a person out there making whatever you're making, doing whatever you're doing, you don't have to give into that. That's not a thing you need to do. Like, you don't have to listen to everybody coming down the pike with a genius idea about how you can make your art better. Just make your art better and let the other people be other people, and you'll be just fine. Because I was just talking to somebody about how I was doing Patreon and I was doing the Hobbit movie, and they proceeded to tell me my entire business model for life is wrong. And that was nice, like 2 minutes before I turned the microphone back on. So golly gee, that was swell. Thanks, boomers. Good job destroying the planet, you guys. And with that said, let's get started tonight, shall we? Here we go.
All right. Just remember what I've taught you.
The fuck is that?
Hey, yo.
Let's go while we're young.
So, yeah, how are you? I hope you're doing okay. I'm doing good. Thank you for asking. It's been a day. I've been talking all day in one way or another, whether it's podcast recording or Patreon recording and now streaming. So, if I sound a little hoarse, please know I have like 3 large liquids right here to chug down the back of my throat. See if I can get myself sounding more like me. But I hope by and large you're doing well and you're doing okay. It was a good week, I hope, for you, and I hope you're happy making the art you're making. If this is the first time you're hearing this, and someone asked me to do the full intro, so we're going to do the full intro. This is the first time you're hearing this is the Writer's Chat, where I, a writing coach for the last 20 years, answer questions, loads of questions, tons of questions, plenty of questions, from all corners of social media, as well as the questions of those people in chat. And it's my pleasure to do so. I hope you get something out of this. I hope you enjoy it. And that said, let's do the intro, shall we? Ladies and gentlemen, guys, gals, non-binary pals, friends, writers, makers, doers, dreamers, planners, dancers, wine enthusiasts, glass blowers, shoelace tires, anybody who dances in secret but then claims they don't know how to dance if they're ever at like a party or something. Anybody who's ever like purposefully stood next to a large like assortment of food but had the self-restraint to not eat so much. Cookie lovers, bakers, gift givers, anybody who's recently started a new project, hot cocoa lovers, straw users, small children, medium-sized children, large children, tweens, teens, burglars, thieves, pirates of all flavors and persuasions, and most importantly, the comrades. Hi, it's good to see all of you. It's nice to be here, and I'm pretty pumped for tonight. We've got some diverse questions. Like we're going to bounce all over the place tonight, and I'm hoping that's all right. Like I'm hoping you don't mind. Last week we got a little personal. Last week we got a little like headspace insight as to like the being of a writer. Tonight we've got some businessy questions. We've got some just broad general stuff, and I'm hoping the people in chat will also, hi chat, by the way, hello YouTube chat, hello Twitch chat. I'm hoping people tonight will also have some questions. So let's see what trouble we can get up to, shall we? First question? Yeah, let's do the first question. How do I market my ebook outside the main ebook retailers? Okay. I don't know how to tell you this, and I'm going to tell you this as plainly and as straightforward as possible. Nothing changes. Nothing changes. The same strategy you use in your big main channels of ebook distribution, be that Amazon or Kobo or B&N or something like that, all the same rules apply everywhere. You're still going to need to pitch. You're still going to need to have a hook. You're still going to need to have elements of your story in mind so that you can present a few facts, package up nice, neat together, and put it out in whatever format the social media or the platform requires. Nothing changes. If you want to add extra bells and whistles because you want to drive traffic, particularly one place or another, that's up to you. But it's not like the strategy radically changes based on what it is you're doing. Like, oh, I'm going to go over here onto this website. Okay, you're going to use the same website strategy as you use over there with the bigger website. It's the fact that you're on the website that's the issue. You're going to use a different approach when you totally change mediums. When you get away from websites and social media, which are functionally the same thing, and you start looking at hand-to-hand sales, in-person appearance sales, random emails, newsletters, those different things require different tactics. But outside of your main ebook retailer, your marketing is always going to be your marketing. You're going to have your messaging. You're going to have your flashpoints, the things that are going to immediately attract people or appeal to people. You're going to have your genre knowledge and your genre expectations, as well as the genre subversions you're providing, so that you can appeal to a diverse number of people who want, like, I want particularly, let's just make up an example, I want romance novels, but I also want to know what you're doing different than all the other romance novels. You've got all the same tools. The tools don't suddenly evaporate just because, you know, you're doing a different space with the same tool. Mostly, it's not so much the fact that you're in a different space to do that. It's the methodology you're using independent of space. Whether I'm on big platform, little platform, newsletter, whatever, how am I getting those words across? What does my pitch look like? Am I constructing a long form pitch or a short pitch? Do I have a little anecdote up front? Do I just get right to the sales bit of it? Do I link first and then text? Or do I write the text and then link at the end like a payoff? How you choose to construct that is going to say a lot about who you are and how you communicate as a writer. That does not mean, that does not mean that there's a completely all right 100% of the time and all wrong 100% of the time way. It's not like that at all. It doesn't ever work like that at all. But what you want to do is, because the platform is smaller, you want to be a little bit more versatile. The last thing we want to do in terms of marketing is repeat the same thing over and over and over again. It feels canned. It feels forced. It feels inhuman. Can I say that? Does that make sense? It feels like not a person doing this job, like I'm just stamping widgets out of the factory. You want to tailor it as best you can relative to the platform, but the marketing itself doesn't substantially change. Now, unless I've misunderstood your question, which is very possible. But if you're asking just general marketing strategy, pitch, hook, sell, push, same process as always. You're going to offer a pitch to incite interest. You're going to say what the pitch is. Here's this thing I'm presenting in this way I'm presenting it. Pitch. You're going to hook, and you're going to demonstrate a way of grabbing the reader's attention, saying, hey, you want to make this purchase. Then you're going to want to drive to a point of traffic, like, hey, go to this link and make this purchase. Or, hey, come to this website and do this. Or, hey, go over here and do that. And then you're going to push. Then you're going to take that same message and say, essentially the internet version of, tell 10 friends and somebody will like your newsletter or something. Like, that push is the outward dissemination of the overall package, if that makes sense. You're not just pushing and saying, hey, everybody buy my book. It's, here's a case study of a customer who's bought this book based on this pitch. You want to be like Susan, don't you? And then you move forward from there. But it's always some combination of those four things: pitch, hook, push, sale, convert, whatever you want to call it. It's always those things. It doesn't change just because the platform or space changes. You might do them in a different order just because, the wind blows a certain way on a certain day, or you're just not feeling it, but you're always going to do the same things. I hope that makes sense. By the way, if that wasn't your question, if you're looking for something more specific, or you've got, I missed some word in your question when I was writing it out, please let me know. I'd be more than happy to take another stab at it. Good first question, though. Nice marketing question right up front. What's question number 2? Question number 2. When should I call my newsletter list? I'm assuming you mean, when do you take people who are on your newsletter list but not active, like they're just sort of getting the email but they're not engaging? If you have the ability to figure out who's not opening in your open read percentages or your metrics or of whatever flavor or what, if you can tell specifically who's not who's not doing the newsletter business, who's getting it but not opening it, or who's not clicking the links inside, whatever metric you want to use to determine activity for your newsletter reader, then that's the measure you want to look for. So if you get a really high read rate but a really low click rate, meaning people are opening your newsletter but they're not taking that extra step to go click links inside the newsletter, then that's something you want to look at in terms of writing your newsletter. What are you saying that sounds good but it's not making that extra push to really get people to click links? Or vice versa, what if they're not even opening? Well, then maybe that's a function of your topic. Maybe that's a function of how frequently you're sending things. There's loads of different little, gears to tweak, levers to pull and push in order to figure out those metrics. But whatever, you pick one metric, whether it's reads or clicks or something like that. Usually those are the big two, but there are others. And then see if there's a pattern. How long has person X, whomever they might be, how long have they not been clicking through? Have they been, just getting it and deleting it for the last 5 weeks? Well, maybe that's your cutoff point. There's no automatic number is what I'm saying. It's not like, oh, it's been 6 months, cut the dead weight. I'm checking my invisible watch here. It's never like that. Do it only purposefully. You don't want to create this blood in the piranha pool atmosphere where any minute you could get cut, so you better click those damn links. You don't want to, it's not Thunderdome. We're not trying to get 2 customers enter, 1 customer leaves kind of vibe. That's not what we're doing. What we're trying to do is just make sure that the people on the list are active and engaged. And yeah, jettisoning the dead weight is going to help somewhat because it'll be more active, but you might also be reducing the total population of people who are active. Because the inactive people could be made active if they just open your newsletter, if they just click a thing. That's not an insignificant point to make. Be really careful in your aggression to cull your newsletter, because who knows, maybe the next newsletter you write, you're going to say a sentence, write a phrase, drop a link or something, and somebody who's just been sort of passively engaging with your material all of a sudden goes, oh shit, that's the thing I've always needed. And then all of a sudden, then you get somebody who's way more engaged. So to answer your question, when should you cull your newsletter list? Look for long patterns of inactivity based on people. When is this person? When has that person? Don't just say like everybody who hasn't answered in 3 months. Start with specifics. Just pick one person, see what they've read, see how they've tracked. If you're happy with that pattern, and if that pattern holds consistently, like one person is sort of endemic of a larger, then look at the newsletter structure. But don't schedule this like the milk expired, it's time to chuck it out. Like your newsletter is a very fluid animal. It's a very malleable, adaptable thing, very much under your control. And the reason why, or at least 50% of the reason why your newsletter list has grown and then filled with dead weight is because you're not engaging them. Yes, the other 50% is they're not reciprocating. They're not coming back, or I shouldn't say coming back. They're not engaging with you. Let's put it that way. But beyond that, you control your 50 and they control their 50. You work your side of the street and they'll follow along. So in part, I don't know. I would love to give you a time. I would love to say every 95 days, every 200 days, once a year. I'd love to say that. I'm really uncomfortable saying that because I think any amount of newsletter size is good. I understand that the cost for these things often scales with the number of people. And if you're trying to like stay in a certain budget tier, like I'm going to make numbers up. 10,000 people at this level, but the 10,001th person is going to cost me an extra $10 a month or whatever. If you want to keep that under, then you want to find 100, 200, 300 inactive people and cut them. But before I would cut them, I'd send them a note. Hey, you should know that I'm thinking about culling my newsletter list. Is there anything I can do, say, offer, etc., to encourage you? Is there any need I can meet for you? Is there anything I can offer? So that, you at least put it out there. And if they respond, great. Then, you'll start a conversation and grow from there. But if it's just a matter of like, you're constantly yelling at the wall over there and nobody's answering back, well, then, hey, time to cut them. But don't put it on a rigorous schedule. Let it be this thing that you're culling because much like brushing your cat or shearing your sheep, you're making it possible to continue for that sheep or cat to be okay afterwards. You're not doing it just because, oh shit, it's Tuesday, time for the culling. Do it because there's a legit reason, but do it also after you've informed them that, hey, this thing's coming up, because nobody likes to be blindsided about a thing. Even if they don't engage and they just receive and sort of sit back, yeah, that sucks because, you're missing out on conversions, but at the same time, like, they've come to expect hearing from you. And I have a small newsletter by all accounts. It's under 100 people. If you ever want to get on the newsletter, by the way, it's johnhelpsyouwritebetter.com/newsletter. It's a little thing. It pops right up. It's also, if you just go to johnhelpsyouwritebetter.com, it's the pop-up that pops up. But I got a small newsletter. It goes out to less than 100 people. By all accounts, that's bad because it's small. But it would never occur to me to cull my list. Not just because it's 100 people, but because I know about 45 of those people enjoy the newsletter but don't have to engage. Like, they choose not to. And that sucks because that's possible 45 customers. But at the same time, I like talking to them. And one of the only ways I talk to them is through the newsletter. I love my newsletter. I do 2 newsletters. Did you know that? You get a second newsletter if you jump on the Patreon. Patreon.com/JohnHelpsYouWriteBetter. My newsletters are awesome. I love doing them. They make me really happy. I like newsletters more than I like blogging. Figure that one out. But don't get real zealous about culling. See what else you can do to re-energize, to catalyze and encourage people. Culling seems harsh to me. Think it over. Actually, I know who asked me this question. Jump on the Discord or call me sometime and we'll work through the more specifics. I would love to know your decision making or your thinking process behind, hey, it's time to cull. I'm curious. All right, shall we go on to one more? Let's do another. Oh my God, it's a spicy business question. Everybody buckle up. Question number 3. What are the pros and cons of using Ingramspark? Does everybody know what Ingramspark is? If you don't know what Ingramspark is, they're a print-on-demand book distributor. They make your manuscript into a book, and then they send their book out through their distribution channels to just about everywhere you think books are. They're very, very popular. They're very, very popular, and they're very widely used. However, I'm going to describe them in a way that's going to make you think that they're the best thing since sliced bread, and then we're going to talk about the problems. But first, let's talk about the good stuff. It's pretty cheap. You're looking at about $49 or $59 now for both a print book and an ebook package for your manuscript. They take a lot of the stress out of that. They handle a lot of those bells and whistles so that you don't have to, much in the same way that Amazon would, Ingramspark does. They don't do like everything, but they'll take away some of the heavy lifting. Some. Put a pin in that. We're coming back to that point. But they're a way of getting your book out there. And it seems like it's very much a hand manuscript to them, get something back, call it a day. Hooray, we are all big winners. It's very straightforward. It seems really ideal. It seems like there are no problems whatsoever. And of course, when you jump on the website and you start looking around for reviews, they are packed with glowing reviews. Best service, good UI, good formatting, all the good stuff, right? Everything seems like they're doing everything except walking on water and healing the blind, right? And now we shift to the bad stuff. Ingramspark has terrible customer service. It is not uncommon for you to ask a question in January and then not get a response until like July. It is not uncommon for them to say that, hey, we'd be happy to send you more books or send you a sample copy, but you're going to pay for it. It is not uncommon for them to say the amount of royalties you make in this deal, we're going to sell your book for, I'll make numbers up, we'll sell your book for $12. We'll send you $1 per book sold, and we're going to keep the other 11, cause. It's not uncommon for them to charge you down to the penny for expenses in the same way that, our cell phone companies will come up with all lovely kinds of fees. It can be prohibitive. It sounds like a great thing. All I did is pay these guys like $40 or $50 or whatever, and I was set. Yeah, that got your foot in the door. But once your foot's in the door, here comes all these other things. Here comes all this other paperwork. Here comes all these other fines and fees and prices and tags and problems. And yeah, you're getting that big distribution, but at what cost? Literally, what financial cost? If you're making $1 and they're making 11, and you're trying to break even, or have a profit, or pay yourself for your work, how many books do you have to sell now? Their distribution of profit is less than Amazon's. They make more off of you and you make less. Amazon is a nice alternative for that. I know they're both corporations. They should both be like, somebody should throw bricks through their front door and send them mean Christmas cards, and it should be a real problem for these people to just exist because corporations are destroying the planet and civilization as a whole. I know. But Ingramspark is like the number one alternative to the conventional thing, because you say to yourself, well, that sounds like a company. That's not a website. That's not, Amazon. That's something different. Yeah, it's different, but it's still the same nonsense packaged in a different suit. Do I think you should use them? If you're really, really dying for a not Amazon publishing experience, sure, go ahead. But I sincerely hope you never run into any kind of customer support issues or publishing issues or delays of any kind, because the minute you run into trouble, Ingramspark is not going to be there to catch you. You're going to just be out there in the wind, man. And I don't want that for you. But if you're really, really, really jonesing and absolutely desperate and super needy to be out there making your book, hey, there you go. The way it is, all right, look. Here's how the industry sees them. You know what a slumlord is? You know, like, hey, they offer these real cheap apartments in the not yet gentrified part of town. Yeah, that sounds great. Except you get in there and there's roaches and rats more so than normal, and the building's falling apart. But hey, I got a roof-ish over my head. Ingramspark is like considered by some. Here, let's shield me from issues. Allegedly, Ingramspark is referred to allegedly as a slumlord of print publishing. Allegedly, they are half a step above those vanity presses that want to just like absolutely gank you and rake you over the coals and empty your bank account. There's a great question in chat that always pops up the minute I start talking about this stuff. What company do you recommend if you're going to publish an ebook? I don't. I think what you should do is find a freelancer who will convert your book into a ebook friendly format. It's not that hard. There's software and professionals for that who will also do the layout for you. I can recommend 2 off the top of my head. And then you pay them, and then you hand sell your book the old-fashioned way off your own website. So you control your SEO, you control your distribution, it's all digital, and you maximize your profit. That's what I think you should do. It's a bit more work. It's less fun than selling it on Amazon by, what is now the old-fashioned way. But you get to retain more control. You get to have more money in your pocket. Seems like it accomplishes all the same goals you want. Passing your work through the lens of a middleman reduces the amount of stuff coming to you. I'm trying to encourage you to reduce the amount of middle persons. It takes a little bit more work, but you're in this to do the work, because just like any other task we do the work, we reap reward. We want to have a loaf of bread. We got to go make the loaf of bread. We want to go sell a book. We want to make a book. We do this work ourselves. Worst comes to worst, you go to Amazon like everybody else, and you roll the dice and you take your shot. But Ingramspark would not be my strong recommendation in this case. Not really my jam. Also, I personally had a bad experience with them. We worked with them when I was with one of the smaller presses I was working with, and they were some of the meanest, rudest people I have ever spoken to in publishing. They rivaled car salesmen for their upsell tactics. It was a real uncomfortable. All right, so short version of the story. We got into like a discussion with some customer service people, and I lost my temper. I know, big surprise to anybody who's ever met me. I lost my temper, and I got yelled at, not by the customer service people, but by the people I was doing work for. I lost my temper because I absolutely blew up, and I got yelled at for completely losing my shit when it was pointed out that the customers on this end were making like a 10th, less than a 10th, maybe a 15th or a 20th of the profit we were projected to make. Like, they sold us on a false bill of goods, and I saw red, and it was a whole problem. I don't like Ingramspark. If they're your thing of choice, if they're your flavor of the month, hey, by all means, I hope it really works for you. But I can tell you, for me personally, go take a different bus to Successville, please. Great question. That's one of the questions. There's another question coming later. That was one of the questions I was most worried about fumbling the answer. I hope I did all right. Are there, though, while I get a mouthful of water in my face, are there any questions from anybody in chat? Hello, chat. I hope you're doing well. Oh, man, that was good. Badly needed that water. Questions, anybody? Before anybody asks, there's no tea tonight. I forgot to brew a pot. I got too busy recording The Hobbit for Patreon, so it's just water. It's not very glamorous, I know. I do have like a mouthful of root beer left, but that's about it. Mostly it's just water. Questions, though? Or shall we move on? Streaming as we go. Let's go, shall we? Oh, I love this one. Question number 4. How do I handle the risks of putting my family members in my memoir? When should I fictionalize it? How do I prepare to make a good memoir? Okay. Memoirs are tricky. There was a while there maybe like 10 years ago, if not more, where everybody wanted to write a memoir. Everybody thought their life was so remarkable that a memoir was going to be like the thing. In the same way that like teenage vampire romance was a thing for a while, or now it's post like hardship stories of like, we overcame this obstacle and now we found love, or now we found hope. Memoirs were a big popular thing, and it used to drive me nuts because people would ask like, how do I make a memoir? And then I would explain it to them as I'm about to explain to you. And then they would, because it wasn't fun, because some part of it's not fun, they'd not do it. There are risks, though, to doing it. And one of them is if you start talking shit about Aunt Doris is going to be mad. How mad? I don't know. That depends on how badly you paint Aunt Doris. I don't have an Aunt Doris. That's why I can get away with this. But do I think Aunt Doris is going to get hostile and get a lawyer? Probably not, unless like you really like trash her badly. There are risks, though. Mostly they're going to be personal and social. The idea that you're going to say stuff about these people, they're going to see that it's them, and they're going to be upset. And then they won't make those cookies you like at the holiday party, or they'll just stop returning your calls. And maybe for some people that's not so bad, because I mean, Aunt Doris, come on, do we really want to talk to her all the damn time? But for the most part, the risks are really upsetting people. And if you're one of those people who doesn't like to rock the boat while also trying to be creative, a memoir is a little risky there. The high wire act might not have a net underneath you. You can fictionalize it at any point. There's no magic number or no magic metric that says, well, let X amount go by and then start fictionalizing it. No, you can fictionalize it from the jump. That's totally okay. Does that mitigate all the risk? No, it all of a sudden Aunt Doris gets merged with Aunt Elaine. And then all of a sudden you get, Aunt Margaret. Sure. Aunt Margaret, who's the synthesis of those two people, so they can't quite exactly put their finger on who's getting ratted out or who's getting, put on blast. That's fine. It's not bad or wrong to do that. However, you on your constructive organizational end need to keep these people straight. So write it down, make a note, use a story Bible, whatever tool you need to use to get it across, get it across. It's not going to mitigate all the risk unless you hyper fictionalize everything and you take yourself out and you fictionalize yourself and you fictionalize them and you fictionalize the world and you fictionalize the story. You embellish, you create, you falsify, you alter. That's a lot of work. And at that point, you're pretty much writing wholesale fiction. The point of memoir is truth. And one of the best ways you prepare for memoir is to be truthful. And part of that truth is both recognizing it in others as well as recognizing it in yourself. The two best steps to create an effective memoir are, one, figure out the parameters. Where does it start and where does it stop? It doesn't stop with, death and it start with birth, because that's an autobiography. That's a different animal. A memoir is contained. It's got a set thing. It's, this period of time from here to here, or the time around these events. It's the term of a presidency because the president's writing the book, or it's the term of when my kids, between my kids being born and my kids going to school, or it's the years I was away in this group or this facility or whatever. It's got boundaries. And you need those boundaries, because without them, the memoir tends to range, because along with those boundaries, there has to be a through line. A through line is a thing that connects all the stories, connects all the points. It doesn't need to be present in every single paragraph and every single page, but it needs to be common enough that you can say, well, this is a memoir that focuses on the importance of honesty between people, or the number of ways bad food can really mess up a family. Whatever, something. Find your through line, define your boundaries, and be honest. Try to be honest with some kind of voice and tone to it. If you're going to write a funny memoir, if you're going to write a heartfelt memoir, if you're going to write like a deeply passionate memoir, an exaggerated memoir, a Baron Munchausen memoir or something, like whatever it is, lean into it. But stay within those boundaries and follow that through line, and your memoir will stitch together far better than if you're just rehashing, Here's 15 years of Christmases. Because I'm falling asleep even just thinking about it. Boundaries, through line, focus, lens. Those are the best tools for building a memoir. You're going to upset people. You cannot write a memoir where everybody's happy. Not you, not them, not those randos over there, not the randos over there. Somebody somewhere is going to be fractionally, marginally, or some percentagely upset by what you've got. It's just the nature of the business. So if you're really worried about it, don't do it. If that's really a problem, because you're worried you're going to bite the hand that feeds you, because, you know, the people you've got to most talk some shit about are the people who help you pay the mortgage, then yeah, it's time to prioritize. Maybe not putting them on blast right now. Wait till one of them kicks the bucket. I don't know. Find a reason, find an avenue to do that, and then do something about it. But if you're really worried about the risks, do not do this. Take the idea, take the morsel of story, and hyper-fictionalize it. Turn it into just straight fiction. It's going to go a lot easier for you. Also, from a publishing standpoint, memoir no longer as popular as it was. Just keep that in mind too. On we go to the next one. Here we go. Here's the big question. Oh man, strap in. Okay. How would you fix U.S. copyright law if you could? All right, come here. I'm just gonna move in. Okay. Let's be really clear. I don't think this should be a thing at all. Okay. I'm disclaiming that up front. All of this stuff is bad. Structure, organization like this, it's bad. It's designed by gerontocrats and corporatists and capitalists to exploit and reduce the amount of available art by protecting material for longer periods than it should be protected. It's arbitrary and it's fickle, and rather than being predicated on the virtue of art or the creation of a good idea, it's predicated on who has enough money and enough lawyers to outmaneuver the other person. It's an unfair, rigged system. So if I really had my way, much like with money, boundaries, states, mortgages, debt, and everything else that would be quickly booted out into the river, I'd get rid of it because we made it up and it's dumb. But if I have to play within the rules, because let's just challenge the question a little, the two parts I would get rid of in copyright law are as follows. One, I would eliminate posthumous copyright. If you're dead and that's it. No royalties, no nothing. You're dead. Goodbye. You are the last person who gets comment on what happens to your work after you're dead, because you're dead. Hang on a minute. I don't know the story yet is even the middle point. We're coming back to that question because that's confusing and I got to draw a picture in my face. Copyright law first, then we'll answer your question. I would eliminate posthumous royalty and posthumous copyright because you're dead. And what are you going to do? Complain? You're dead. And two, I would force and finalize one set window for copyright extension. Copyright exists as it stands now, 50 years plus for past the death of the creator. And companies exploit this rule repeatedly. It's why you can't tell a story with Mickey Mouse. That's dumb. Really, all that says, all those manipulations of the time and the deadlines, they're just expressions of a company being afraid to share their material, because if they shared Mickey Mouse, they wouldn't be the most specialist Mickey Mouseiest people on the planet, and they would have their feelings hurt. And that's dumb. That's just stupid. That's just wholesale dumb and stupid. So I would eliminate posthumous royalty because you can't spend it. You're in the ground. And I would finalize and say, you get 10 years. 10 years. There's your window. You die, you're done. But companies can extend for 10 years if they're still operating in business. But after 10 years, corporations open. You want to start telling Mickey Mouse stories over at 7-Eleven? Go ahead. Enjoy. Why? Because we don't need these boundaries. We don't need them. IP is a made-up piece of capitalist horse shit. We don't need it. You can just make art. You understand that these inventions were really only about 400 years old? 17 1790, I think. And prior to that, we just made things. We just made things. Do you know the amount of art that was made prior to 1790? Here's a hint. It's bajillions of things. Yeah, and we didn't, like, you could paint the Mona Lisa. You could paint the Mona Lisa too. You could paint the Sistine Chapel Part 6 where everybody's dressed like wrestlers. I don't know. You could totally do that. Why not? Who cares? All of a sudden, we got real precious about copyright. Why? It's an idea. You can't copyright an idea. That's just brain chemistry. That's electricity and chemicals in your head. But for some reason, we decided, because capitalism, we can commodify everything. Everything gets a price tag. Everything gets a deadline. Everything gets controlled. Everything gets money. Why? You think Venus de Milo is really mad? No, it's Venus de Milo. Just whatever. I don't like copyright. It's annoying. It's confusing. It's also a great source of stress because every writer is like, oh my God, what about copyright? Am I in violation of copyright if I do this thing? What if I mention a band? Yeah, you mentioned a band. Okay. These are pointless things. It's a hyper-capitalistic, litigious society, and copyright is one of the tools they use to poison and infect people rather than help produce more art or liberate people from the fear that their art would be rejected. They don't encourage art. This discourages art. That's not good. I don't want that. There should be more stories. They can be different and different than what you would do and different than what I would do, but there should be more stories. You want to write really trashy erotica with like old cartoon characters? Great, go for it. I hope, you can make sure that Mighty Mouse finally gets some. But if you want to do that. There shouldn't be anything stopping you. If people don't like it, that's on them. That's not a thing. Copyright laws. Oh, it's one of those frustrating. This question was asked entirely just to bug me. I know this. I love you for asking. Thank you for asking, but come on now. Wave the black flag. We don't need any of these things, comrade. There's no point to it. I do want to answer this question in chat. If you tell a story from A to Z, but you end up starting in the middle, so you start at L, and then you jump back to A, and then build up to L, and then resume from L to Z, I think I've understood your question correctly. What are things to keep in mind? Well, for starters, you've got to be organized. Second, you want to make sure that your L is interesting, because if your L sucks and it's really not carrying your plot, not forwarding your character arc, not a big action beat, not a big beat of some kind, shape, or form, that L is going to feel really middling. And by the time you come back to it, the reader, no matter what, will lose the thread of what's going on. Your story model of writing linearly, writing forward, but then hopping back and then catching up, is what's done in almost every movie with a framing device with like a flashback or an explainer. That's all you're doing. Make sure that your explainer makes sense so that when we come out of the flashback, we carry forward. Try not to hit it in the exact middle. You want to skew a little bit nearer the ending because otherwise it's going to feel really sluggish and we don't want to battle that momentum. But by and large, you want to keep your story organized. You want to make sure that whatever your point that you get up to or cut away from and then come back to has sufficient tension underneath it, because otherwise it's just going to feel like, oh, wait, what happened to the story we were following? Now we're just kind of here and it's middling. It's going to feel like there's a noticeable scratch in the record, a noticeable gap. You want to get away from that. Beyond that, it's just regular story organization, because the most dominant trait there is that you're writing linearly, A to Z, no matter what. Does that answer your question? Does that make sense? I'm going to get another mouthful of water. That work, though? If you're going to tell the story A to Z and start in the middle, like I wouldn't, the middle, how do I say this? The middle is just the middle. It's not a thing. Like it's not huge. It doesn't have to be the exact middle of the story to be significant. Find a point that's significant, not necessarily L in our example, and you'll have more flexibility for the rest of your story. It doesn't need to be the exact middle. No one cares about the exact middle because we're writing in 3 acts or 5 acts. So the middle's kind of skewed. Don't get hung up on percentage. What's the best point to break your story and loop back or pick back up from and carry forward? Find that point, whether it's L or P or W or whatever. Find that point, no matter what it is, and your story structure will straighten itself out. Great question. Mouthful of water. Oh, man, that was good. Question 6. How close to the original story can I get in a fairy tale retelling without being accused of plagiarism? I'm making a face because this question does not make sense to me, and I should have asked for more clarification, but I thought I knew the question when I wrote the graphic. Fairy tales, if you're retelling them, you have absolute control over how much you fabricate and how much is grounded in what it was. So if you want to take Pinocchio and you want to modernize Pinocchio, you're referencing the concrete early folklore for Pinocchio is not plagiarism. It's reference. Plagiarism is the word I'm getting hung up on, because if you're retelling a fairy tale, meaning you're doing something to it, I'm not sure where the plagiarism comes in, because plagiarism is just lifting wholesale and repeating it. If that's what you mean by retelling, I'm not exactly sure how much deviation you've got from the original. Like if you've got a fairy tale, I don't know, pick a fairy tale, Cinderella. Let's just do Cinderella. If you've got a fairy tale and the only thing you're changing is something, even if we say something significant, like instead of a glass slipper, it's a glass, I don't know, it's a glass basketball shoe. Like that's still a change, but you've still got people hacking off toes in order to get their foot in the shoe. You know what I'm saying? Like that's not plagiarism. That's just poor writing. Like that's not making enough of a significant change to really subvert or challenge or say something with the original material. That's just making a simple modification and calling it a day. It's kind of, I would call it lazy. Is maybe that's what you mean. I don't know. Plagiarism. Like if I'm modernizing Hamlet because now I want to tell the story of some lions and some other people in the African savannah, I'm not plagiarizing, because like I'm not going to have my small lion suddenly give this masterful I should kill myself suicide monologue, right? But at the same time, oh, you're very welcome. At the same time, like, what am I going to have, like my wildebeest and my meerkat get together and look at the skull of somebody and go, alas, poor baboon. I knew him well. Like, not going to do that either. I'm getting hung up on plagiarism. I know I'm making a thing about it, and I don't think I'm supposed to. If you're worried about how much of the original you're allowed to use in a retelling, that's completely and entirely up to you. You can use as much or as little as you want. I'm also curious to know that who would be accusing you of plagiarism, unless you're changing or fabricating so little that you're basically just like, you've got the same story, but you're just changing like the setting. It's Cinderella, but now it's in Boston. Or it's Pinocchio, except now instead of a whale, they're swallowed by a carp or a tuna or something. You want to make sure that when you're retelling a fairy tale, that you're doing something substantial with that retelling. You're modernizing it. You're adding extra layers. You're adding extra characters. You're taking the challenge of the conflict, but you're twisting it in some way so that instead of Hamlet, you've got the Lion King, or instead of like, Taming of the Shrew, you get, 10 Things I Hate About You or something. Or instead of Romeo and Juliet, you're getting that one strange Transformers movie. Like the way you want to go about this is that you've got this novelty, this newness, this new lens you want to present on an old thing, and that becomes front and center. Doing that effectively it's not going to eliminate the accusation of plagiarism, I guess, but it's certainly not a reason to not produce the retelling. Like if you're worried that somebody's going to go, oh my God, all you did was retell insert fairy tale here. Like, why would you give that oxygen? Because eventually, you know, like we can sit down and go, oh, well, any vampire story is just Lord Ruthven or Polidori, isn't it? You know, we can always dig back farther and find something. The mystical con man is just, you know, it's every leprechaun and elf and fairy story. The mysterious stranger is just Norse saga, isn't it? Like, we can always dig around and find the roots of something and claim that you're ripping it off. Hoo-hoo. But, like, to what end? You want to make sure that when you're retelling with affect, with purpose, with function. But the degree at which you retell is totally under your control. Just understand that the less retelling you do, you're not really developing your writing. You're just sort of painting by numbers. And you should be doing more than that because you're capable of doing more than that. I hope that answers your question. If I haven't, let me know, and I'll put an extra podcast episode out explaining what I mean, and you can explain what you mean. All right. Are there any questions from chat? Hello, everybody. It's good to see you all. Thanks for coming. All good? Everybody okay? Questions about anything? All things large, small, and everywhere in between. Just so we're clear, no tea tonight. It's a mouthful of root beer and some water. I forgot to brew a pot of tea. I've been talking for hours into this microphone. That's on me. My bad. I just covered the old tea question. A silver needle or raspberry? I don't care for silver needle. I've never cared for silver needle. It just wasn't my thing. Raspberry's not bad, though I tend to prefer my raspberry carbonated. Related to the last question, how far can parody go? How much can I reference before people start yelling? Item number 1, depends on what people. Some people are going to yell more than others, and you have no control over that. 2, you get to parody pretty much as far as you want to take it. Remember that parody taken too far it's punching. You don't want to punch down, obviously, because that's grotesque and we're better humans than that. But parody has an enormous amount of leeway. Whether we skew into just reference or whether we go to comedy or whether we go to black comedy or satire, all those parodic forms take things pretty far. Whether you're overt in your references and you're straight saying the emperor has no clothes, or whether you're being more overt and referential to things where you're not saying somebody's name but you're alluding to them. Yeah, you get a lot of latitude there. How much? There's no magic percentage, but you can take things pretty far before people start yelling, although there are going to be people who start yelling the minute you start doing it anyway, and you've got to figure out where your comfort line is. Because that comfort line is going to determine how far you go. How far are you comfortable? How much do you really want to do it? Not in like a challenging way, not like a prove me wrong kind of way, but where are you comfortable? How far would you take it? That's your line. That's how much you can get away with. And through that combination of sincerity and honesty and craft, you'll buy yourself more wiggle room, but it's always going to be determined on the line you are or aren't willing to cross. And yes, you should have a line. Having no line is not an option. Good question. Great question. Any others? I don't get asked enough about parody and satire. I'm not sure why. It might be because people fundamentally misunderstand like what parody and satire are and aren't, but they don't come up enough. One thing I would like to do is if I can find the time to go back to long form video like we used to do on Monday nights, I would break down genres again. I had a good time doing that, and I put parody and satire on the list now that I'm thinking about it. That's good. That's really good. Maybe I'll make myself a note in the next batch of questions. Shall we move on though? Keep going. Question 7. Is building an audience through Patreon a viable strategy? And how can I make it one? Okay. It's Viable is a tricky word, right? Because what's viable for me might not be what's viable for you. For me, viable is the ability to pay at least 2 bills from my Patreon and then use the remaining money for food. That's what's viable for me because I have other things going and other streams of income and other means to acquire things. So I'm not like living and dying solely by Patreon anymore, which is awesome. By the way, patreon.com/John Helps You Write Better if you want to get in on this. Patreon conceptually, I don't want to say Patreon has a problem because it's not the website's fault, but building through a Patreon like that is a closed audience. You have to get people to buy in first. Even if you were to outreach with like offering free material, like, hey, here's a freebie to see if you want, see if you want in. Here's a sample of what you can expect. I do it. I think everybody does it at some point. But it's still a closed loop because the number of people are contained within the patron pool, right? Like you're really only dealing with your backers, and backers aren't necessarily the same as general consumers because backers pay in regularly, consistently, whereas a consumer is one and done. Somebody can click on a website in Amazon and buy your book. That's different than somebody who's showing up every month with an expectation that they're going to get something more than just this one product. It can be viable depending on what it is you're producing. For me, for Patreon, it's supplemental commentaries. It's more teaching opportunities. It's a chance to watch a movie with all my friends and talk about it. Not like talk shit about it unless it's real bad. See Tom Cruise Mummy movie. But it's also a chance, like I'm doing now with the Hobbit movies, to take a thing apart and point out like, hey, here's this examination of a thing. Here's some tools to think about. Here's some ways that you can take this material into your own work. That's viable because it strengthens within that community. My patrons are better informed as creatives than if they weren't because they're getting multiple things a week from me. But in terms of it growing relative to something like my streams or something like the podcast, that's different because there's a different factor and a different way of growth in those things. A podcast is listened to by anybody who wants to listen to a podcast. That is a far bigger number than the number of patrons I have. Because again, there's that hurdle, there's that buy-in obstacle to navigate. If you wanted to make Patreon viable, you would have to provide more than that cost, right? So if you're saying my Patreon is $2 a month, $1 a month, whatever, let's just say $2. If it's $2 a month, you have to make sure that you are offering everybody more than $2 worth of material a month. How do you evaluate that? Well, it's kind of a shot in the dark because somebody might say, for $2 a month, I would expect, I'm going to something up, 5 pages of text. And somebody else might go, oh no, 2 pages, $2, I'll take 2 pages. You, the producer, still get to set those terms. Just because they're supplying the income, they're supplying the dollars, doesn't really mean they're your boss. That's a hard thing to get your head around sometimes because it feels like you want to make them happy so that they keep paying, but at the same time, like you still want to be true to yourself. That's where the viability and frustration comes in because a lot of people can feel like they're producing out the wazoo, but it's not really growing and not really catching on. In part, that's because what they're producing is limited in scope. If I'm only making 10 things, then when my 10 things are out, well, that's it. But if I'm creating something bigger and broader, like I'm writing a short story every month, as long as I'm able to tell people, hey, I'm producing a short story, I have the option to grow. And from that growth, I can make this more viable. But here's the last but, I guess. It's slow. It's real slow. If you're starting with very little audience, if you are starting with very little pre-baked in, hey, friends, get together with me on this, it's slow. Can it grow? Absolutely, it can grow. My advice to anybody out there who's thinking about jumping to Patreon, first of all, do it. It's awesome. I love being able to both pay for electricity and buy food every month. It's rad. But don't start with Patreon. Start first somewhere else. Start producing elsewhere and making it available. And then over time, as you grow a set of people who have come to associate your work with quality and they know to come to you when they want a thing, then you can say, hey, if you want to support me as I push bigger and brighter and longer and farther and whatever, then come to Patreon. Starting up front with Patreon when you don't have an audience and you don't have material to distribute can be real frustrating because you'll stare at really small numbers, if any, for a while until that ball starts rolling. Give yourself an advantage, get that ball rolling first, then go to Patreon when you want to start growing, when you want to start expanding. For a long time, my Patreon was very tiny, and I didn't know what the hell I was doing. I was tap dancing around a couple different ideas, and it was nice and it was okay, but it didn't really take off. It has started to take off as I've started to talk about more popular things or talk about things in more depth, and the Patreon allows it to grow. One of the reasons why I can afford to stream in two places is because Patreon's expanding. And Patreon encouraged me financially and just communally to, get back into blogging and push for products and do it will take on some life of its own and it will develop into things that you can grow with. But to start, you got to know it's going to be a tough road and you got to know that it's going to be small. But if you're bringing in a pre-baked audience with pre-made expectation, it's a little bit easier, but it is viable. It's just going to be time consuming. It's going to take time. It's not fast. Even if you have a huge YouTube channel with, very popular, some number of videos, it can still be difficult to get that ball rolling because your initial diehard fans will buy in, but that's a smaller segment of your overall total viewership, readership community. And you've got to convert that larger number. It's always going to come back to that conversion. How are we growing? How are we bringing new people in? That's where it either gets viable because you're actually doing those things, or it's not viable because you're just a closed off little box and we hang out and talk to our 10 friends and then we send them something goofy like a record player, Amanda Palmer. But that's a different part of the discussion for a different day. Shall we go on to the next question? Question 8. Oh, I love this one. How do I know when I'm wasting my time with all these query letter rejections? When is that telling me something? Well, it's telling you something now. It's telling you that your query letter isn't very good. It's not telling you that you're a bad person. It's not telling you that publishing is a rigged game. It is, but this rejection is not telling you that. It's not telling you that you should quit. It's not telling you that you should give up. It's not saying you should, regret all your life choices or something. It's just saying that your query letter is bad. That's a fixable thing. You can do something about that. As for wasting your time, no rejection is going to tell you that. Maybe if you really got into like a screaming match with somebody, they'll say something to you like, you're wasting your time, go suck eggs. I guess, maybe, but that's not the norm at all. If you think you're wasting your time, then you're wasting your time. But if you're only, if your only requirement, your only proof of wasting time is rejection, and the only way you're validating your time is by acceptance letters, you're in the wrong field because you will get far more rejection of many different kinds than you would acceptances. You're only going to get accepted once, whoever publishes your work. You're going to get rejected way more than that. If you are tired about the number of rejections you're getting, first of all, they're not rejecting you. Let's be here. Come here. Let's be real clear about this. Let me move my camera a little. They're not rejecting you. They're rejecting the thing you are presenting them. Your query letter sucks. It's fixable. You can learn how. You can get better at it. There are videos on this here YouTube channel that will help you do that. You could come to a chat and ask questions. I'd be happy to explain to you how to make a query letter better. But if you're looking at this and going, well, I've been rejected again, I'm wasting my time. One, that kind of sounds like you're assuming that you were immediately expecting better responses right away, which is, I'm not really sure that's an accurate representation of how you think publishing works. But if you're really frustrated and you're really bothered and you're looking for a reason to quit, then sure, rejection is a great reason to give up. But know this, if you give up, you're never going to reach your goal. It's telling you something if you're looking for validation. If it's telling you that, your query letter sucks, go write a new query letter from scratch. Great. Maybe that makes a difference. If you think it's telling you something as though it's confirming some kind of great heaven's divine prophecy that you're not supposed to be doing this, well, you're wrong, because none of those things are real. There is no grand prophecy or conspiracy keeping you from producing your work. It's just that your query letter sucks. Let's not make it more than it really is. If you don't like rejection, though, you are entering into a field that is rejection dominant. Even if you self-publish, let's take some publishing stuff off the table. Even if you self-publish, your form of rejection changes. Instead of its rejection letter, now it's going to be low sales, no sales, or poor reviews, or all three. You still have to confront rejection. You still have to confront your own feelings about rejection. You can't really get away from that unless the only real way I have ever found to get away from rejection while still publishing is to manually print all your things and either carry them around with you and then for no money only hand those things out to people who are genuinely excited, or 2, print everything out, put it in a box, put it in your garage. Any other time, any other way you interact with another human, you run the risk of rejection. That's not because you're a bad person. It's not because you're terrible. It's not because you shouldn't be doing this. It's because you don't know how that other person is going to respond. They might like it. They might love it. They might hate it. They might be indifferent. You get to determine how you perceive their response, but you cannot control their response. They might go, yeah, I liked it. And your brain, you might hear, oh my God, it was awful. Never do that again. But they might just mean, yeah, it was okay. It wasn't great, but it wasn't awful. But it's up to you to figure out how you decode their statement. It's up to you if you want to quit or not. I get this question all the time from people who are looking for permission slips to quit. And I'm going to tell you right now in this video right here at this timestamp, if you want to quit, go ahead. I'm not going to be mad at you. I wish you wouldn't, but I understand if you want to. I get it. This shit is hard. It's unfair. It's biased. It's a rigged game. It's really hard to do this. It's really hard to make a living at this. I know. I'm poor as shit and starving to death. I get it. But at the same time, you don't have to Sisyphus this. We're not always rolling that ball up the hill and then just kind of like begrudgingly letting it roll back down. If you're really struggling and you're unwilling to take those steps to make the changes you need to make, then maybe this isn't what you need to be spending your time with, and it's time to consider other things. If you're worried that, the expectation somebody has for your writing is more than you can deliver and you're unwilling to make those changes, then yeah, I would consider looking at a different creative endeavor. But the rejection letter isn't telling you that. Only you can tell yourself that. I don't want you to quit unless you want to. And if you do, I wish you well. And if you're just feeling frustrated because your query letter sucks, well, let's go make a better query letter. Okay, cool? Awesome. Great question. On we go to the next. Question number 9. What are the required parts of a story Bible if it's only for my use and no one's going to see it? Okay. Listen very carefully. Listen very, very carefully. There are no required parts of a story Bible if it's just for you. If it's just I'm holding up a little notepad. If it's just a little notepad and you're the only one who's ever going to see it, there are no required parts. No one's going to know because you're the only one seeing it. If you're making a thing because you've got a group of authors or a collective or a pimp or some kind of bigger structure to support your writing, then yeah, you're going to want something with a bit more structure. And that structure is probably going to include just the basics of premise, theme, character, plot, and world building. Premise, theme, character, plot, world building. 5 things. Those are the basics. Everything else past that, chapter breakdown, character appearances, scene construction, arcs, all that stuff, those are extra things. You don't need to have them if you can just keep it straight with the 5 things, but even that's only predicated on the fact that other people are going to see it. If it's just for you, it can look like whatever. Like here, I'll show you. I don't know if you can see this on the camera. It's like a handful of scribbles. It's some notes about a blog post. Technically, that's the blog post story Bible. It's 4 little bullet points so that I can remember to write it in the blog post tomorrow. So it goes out on Friday. It's not labeled. There's no headings or anything. It's just 4 notes I wrote to myself while I was thinking about it. And that's a story Bible, and that's fine. Don't get hung up on some idea that these tools we use, or some of us use more than others, for writing have a codified structure, like an outline or a synopsis or a query letter or something like that. They have suggested formats. They have loose templates. But the goal here isn't to slavishly follow the template. In the same way that if you buy like the story grid or any of the Save the Cat bullshit, you might feel like you have to stay in this template. You've got to stay in this format. You don't. You don't at all. It might be comforting at first while you get used to it, but the goal here is to take it in your own direction, to use it in your own way, to manipulate and avoid and trim and change and subvert and challenge and explore your idea. These are tools and framework. You're not going to have to use every tool in the toolbox. You use some more than others. Don't get hung up on like, I have to have a story Bible. Why? If it's just for you, like have a note card if that makes you happy, or a legal pad, or a steno pad, or 4 scribbled bullet points on a memo pad that you found in the other room. Like, it doesn't need to be this whole big thing. If it's just for you and you're the only one who's going to use it and the only one who's going to see it, nobody cares what it looks like. The minute you start bringing in other people, keep the structure really loose, keep it really simple, but even that doesn't need to be anything. It's not. Don't get hung up. Please don't get hung up. It's not that big a deal. Just do whatever you can, make whatever you can to help organize yourself, whether it's a synopsis or an outline that is 10 pages of prose or 4 bullet points or pictures or a weird Pinterest board or like one of those things in your garage with string and drywall and push pins. Whatever works for you is perfect. Just do that, okay? Just do what works for you and don't sweat it. Great question. I'm going to stick more water in my face. Are there any more questions from anybody in chat? Anybody? Anything? Any questions? Or shall we move on? Are we ready to go? Ready to move? All right. Into the home stretch we go. Question 10. I just heard about a woman doing an in-person signing and only 3 people showed up. What do I need to know about doing a signing? First of all, 3 people is amazing. I don't know if you know this, but there's like a plague going on, and a lot of people are very uncomfortable congregating in groups for any number of reasons. And that's okay. And we should not force people to do that. And it's a thing and we should pay attention to it. But if you're a relative unknown creative, if you have a very small following for whatever reason, 3 people's awesome. And you should be really pleased and satisfied and proud that there are 3 people. I'm saying this because right now, I don't think you can see this. Just over my head, right around here, there's this little number that tells me I have 3 people watching this. That's great. I love all of you. It's really wonderful. Typically, that number's between 3 and 5. It used to be like 10 and 15, but now we're at 3 and 5. It's fine. It's not bad. You didn't fail. Even if you had 0, you didn't fail. Because doing the signing, setting all that up, getting ready for it, having material for it, that's still something you have to do. Even now, a virtual signing, just hopping on Zoom or hopping on a stream or something and saying like, hey, I'm going to talk about my stuff. Even if nobody shows, it isn't like, you you wait here patiently until the number goes up and then you start talking. Like if nobody came to a stream, if right now everybody who was watching just bailed, I would still do this. Even if nobody came, I'd be upset about it. My feelings would be hurt. I'd, probably have another glass of water and then text somebody that, oh shit, today was a bomb. But it's okay if nobody shows. This is okay. Here's the hard thing to explain. You're both doing this for other people and you're not doing this for other people. It's great when only 3 people show. It's great when 30 people show. It's great when 300 people show. Wonderful. But don't only do it contingent on the people. Do it because you want to talk about your work. Do it because you like talking about your work. Do it because it's a chance. Even if nobody shows up, you'll just have to learn how to vamp. You'll have to learn how to pitch and talk. Because even if nobody showed, this is getting recorded. This will show up on YouTube. You can use this down the road for something. There's always an opportunity and a utility to what you produce and what you do. Don't just like, I'm only going to talk if 5 people show up. Like, well, that hoses the 4 people that do. Don't be like that. What do you need to know about doing a signing? Well, the audience is going to be small. Plan on it being small. That way you're surprised when anything else happens. When you're doing a signing, even if it's just you in a physical bookstore and nobody shows up, well, then whoever shows up, I guess you just hang out. It doesn't have to have this big rigid structure. You can just, buy somebody a cup of coffee and the 2 of you can just chat. Or you can chat to the people at the bookstore if you're doing it at a bookstore. Or if it's just you and a camera, you can just have a conversation to the internet. It doesn't have to be anything big. They are stressful for some people. They're stressful for me, and I like talking for a living. It's exhausting. It requires some energy. You got to get your head straight. You got to be willing to do this. It can be a little nerve-wracking. Like right now, my heart is, thumping away, and that's a thing for me. But you got to know that going in, like, well, this is what I signed up for. I'm doing this signing. There's going to be these pressures. There's going to be this anxiety. But beyond that, you're just talking about the stuff you love. You're talking about a subject matter. It's your book. You wrote it. Who's going to know more than you? You're the author. So talk about it. Talk about what you love. Talk about what you like. Talk about what sucked. Talk about what was really hard. Talk about what surprised you, good or bad. The writing process. What you wish you did differently now that it's done. What you wish would happen next. Answer questions in your, ask the question in your head. Not that you have to like randomly cut the camera and then change angles and then suddenly start talking in a different way as though you're a different person, or you've got to put on a hat and pretend to be a different person or whatever. But if no one's talking and it's just you and it's you into a microphone, into a camera, then ask the question. You might be thinking, what was it like to write this book? It's my first book. Was I nervous? I'll tell you, I was nervous. It was really scary. The first 5,000 words, I thought I was just going to faint every time I turned on Word. But after about the 4,010th word, I really felt like it was more important that I get this story out. So I just started having more fun with it. And then you just start talking to yourself out loud. You probably talk to yourself plenty. Just now you're going to do it in a different space, in a different chair. It's going to feel weird. It's going to be a little scary, but those feelings are temporary. You're not actually in any danger. Please tell your limbic system to chill the fuck out. You're going to be fine, but it's just a matter of talking. And over time, it does get easier. I can't say over time it always gets more successful, but it does get easier to do. And anything easy to do feels better because it's easier. Lower stress, lower barrier. But beyond that, there's a lot out of your control. And you got to be okay with not controlling the number of people who show up and their urgency and whether or not they all buy a book and whether or not they all stay for the entire time or if it's just kind of, they dot in and dot out. Can't control that. Can't worry about it. Just a thing that happens. But show up, do the best that you can be proud of. And everything else that won't necessarily take care of itself, but it's going to be a lot easier to manage when it's done. What a wonderful question. Question 11. Can a story be unpitchable? I'm making a face. No, I don't think a story can be unpitchable, but I think there are going to be a lot of pitches that don't work for stories. But the story itself can always be pitched. There's talk in some fields like how like a story can't be made into a movie because it's too complicated or it's too expensive or it's too this or it's too that. That's not the same thing, because you could pitch that. You could talk about it abstractly and say, hey, wouldn't it be cool if there was a movie that did this? But that doesn't make it unpitchable. Even if your story is something terrible and transgressive and grotesque and messy. I once worked with a client who had this story idea about things that violate the terms of service on most streaming platforms. And it was all those things kind of mashed together because he was really interested in like pushing buttons and getting really transgressive with a thing. And he could still pitch that. It's not the easiest pitch. You have to kind of like tap dance around a few minefields and then get into the material, or just hit them with the strength up front and just be like, hey, there's this thing that's really jarring. I'm about to say some words that are a little shocking, and I'm going to say them in a string of sentences and just sit with it. But I think any story can be pitched. Any story. Even the ones we don't like, even the ones that are uncomfortable, even the ones where we wouldn't consider it to be much of a story, or it wouldn't be a story that we ourselves would like. I think it can still be pitched. That doesn't mean I think people would buy it. I don't think it's market viable, but you could definitely make a pitch for it. Yeah. I'm sitting here thinking like, what would be unpitchable? And for me, maybe it's just me, but nothing. It's a matter of whether or not people would make that purchase, though. I could pitch the hell out of anything, even if I disagree with it, but that doesn't make it unsellable. It's not the same thing. If you're asking, can a story be unsellable? Yeah, totally. Absolutely. You can have stories that are well made, but not marketable because of their content or because of their theme or because of just how you've written it. It might be technically correct, but your production and what you're producing, as well as the how, can render it unsellable. Like if you're writing something that's really negative, really aggressive, really phobic, really hostile, really subversive, really, really damaging and harmful to others, malicious, angry, hurtful, whatever, that can be unsellable. You could pitch it, so it's not unpitchable, but it is absolutely unsellable. And for as much as I want to say that there's space on every shelf for all art, depending on the nature of what it is you're writing, the number of shelves available to you will be limited. Not everybody's going to go for your pro-fascist story. Some people will. Good for them. But not everybody. And you shouldn't expect that. Nor should you get angry and try to force your unsellable thing on somebody and then get mad when they don't buy it. That's not their fault. You wrote it. That's on you. But unpitchable? No, I think everything's pitchable. You might not like the pitch, but it's totally pitchable. Question 12. Why do you think no one knows about you, meaning me? More people should. I agree. More people should totally know about me. I think the reason why people don't know anything about me is because I'm a terrible marketer. I'm awful at it. I used to be pretty good at it when I was a medium-sized fish in a small pond for things. But as I started branching out and doing different things and doing more things, I am a very tiny fish in a very big ocean. And I am easily made anxious and uncertain, easily rattled, more so now than ever, which really curbs my ability to be like, hey, come check my shit out, which is really one of the things holding me back. Also, I don't have the luxury of time to really sit down and just churn out garbage. Like there's a load of people producing a ton of digital products. If you jump on YouTube and just search for them, you'll find them. They'll show up right away. Their thumbnails have like really like handwriting and neon going on and a lot of like quirky people in chunky sweaters. Like those people exist. They churn out garbage all day. I'm uncomfortable doing that. I don't want to do that. Maybe that's what's holding me back. I don't know. But it takes time to do that, and I'm slow and meticulous to the point of annoyance. So I don't do enough marketing, and I don't produce fast enough at a high enough volume, or a low enough content wall at a high volume. I don't make garbage. I take my time. And as a result, since I'm a terrible marketer, it's hard for that stuff to get out. Beyond that, beyond that, for a long time, I just thought I was talking to the wrong people. Like, I was talking to excited, enthusiastic people, but they were not people who they themselves would turn around and tell two of their friends about this thing. They'd keep it to themselves for whatever reason. I don't know if that's still the case, but primarily I think the issue is that I just suck at marketing. Sometimes I'll blame the lack of money. I don't have a lot of money, so it's hard for me to buy more marketing. And partially, I don't always know where. Like, I know the basics. I have these platforms. I do this, I do that. But I've always struggled to convert, usually because it comes down to I don't feel good enough about myself, or I don't know how to reach the people at the far end of my conversion scale. A conversion scale, if you don't know, is the range of people who could potentially be a consumer or a reader or a customer or whatever. There's your near conversion scale are like people who love the genre you write in. They're an easier sell. But as we get farther up or farther out that scale, moving away from you like a radius in a circle, as we get farther out, it becomes harder to convert them because they're less connected to the things you produce. So these would be people who read, but not necessarily in your genre, or people who read, but not necessarily stuff the way you write. I usually run into that, and I often end up blaming them for that because I just do. Because I'm a human, and blaming things is often a lot easier than taking the responsibility of saying sometimes that I don't know what I'm doing all the time. And I feel like I'm dog paddling, and I'm spending all this time and energy just trying to keep my head above water. And it can be frustrating and difficult to realize that my head's above water, but I'm not really swimming forward some days. But yeah, I agree that more people should know what I'm doing. I would love that. It'd be awesome. I'm doing my best. It's, according to some people, probably not good enough, but I'm doing the best I can every day, while also trying to, not do drugs and not die. But I'm not saying that to manipulate or be guilty. I'm just saying, like, I'm doing the best I can. If you want to help, by all means, give me some help. I'd be more than happy to accept some help, but understand, like, I don't have a large bank account to throw you money to say thanks. But I think it's fundamentally a marketing issue more than a messaging issue. There is some segment of people who I'm sure don't like me. There's always been that. And I think that population is very vocal in some spaces, even still. But such is life. I'm not really worried about that so much anymore. Those days of me being that flavor of shitty are long gone. But it's still a marketing thing. I don't do a particularly good job. I don't know what I'm waiting for. That's a great therapy question. I'll take that to therapy with me tomorrow for sure. But yeah, I appreciate the idea that more people should know about me. I'd love that. That would be great. I used to do this thing before we move to the next question. I used to do this thing where I would I'd write in call to actions, which I'm notoriously terrible at. I'd say like, hey, tell 2 friends about this or pass this link along. And, I never get any traction with that. So I stopped doing it because people would say, oh, I'm telling my friends about you. Sure. It's not trickling down my way. So I just have to take your word for it. But, I've always struggled with that for any number of reasons. Totally a therapy question. I'll ask, let's see, what time is it? In 14 and a half hours, I will totally get some answers for you. How's that sound? Great. Shall we wrap this thing up? 13th question. Here we go. Hang on. Mouthful of water first. This one's got an answer. What's the very hardest truth people need to wrestle with as a writer? Okay. Strap in. The absolute very hardest thing you have to wrestle with as a writer is that maybe you shouldn't be a writer. The success some writers have is very intoxicating and alluring for the majority of people who observe them. We see what Stephen King and Neil Gaiman and all those authors who we refer to by their last names, we see what they're doing. We want that success for ourselves. That's normal. That's a human thing. What we don't think twice about, or what we devalue, is the amount of work it takes to get there and the amount of time it takes to do that work to get there. These people weren't successful yesterday. This took years, decades in some cases, to reach the point where you are just now seeing this level of success. And in the face of that, when we turn around and jump into it thinking that one day, well, if it took them 40 years, I've got 6 years, I'll get a 6-year version of this. You throw yourself in and you find out that it's very difficult to do this at any degree, with or without any level of experience, no matter what. It's real hard to be creative. And then we immediately, because of the way we've been conditioned, especially by social media in the last decade, we immediately just flail. We immediately panic. Oh my God, I'm terrible at this. You're not just bad, you're terrible. It's this very catastrophizing way of thinking about things. And you get too many people give up at that point. Way too many people give up at that point. But there is a reality to it. The vast majority of writers, 80 or so percent, give or take, will never finish their first draft. Not of, their fifth book, of their first one ever. 80% will never finish that first draft because they'll come up with any number of excuses, but it comes down to they just don't sit and do the finishing. And I don't mean like they get 80% along and stop. At somewhere along the process, whether they're on page 5 and never finish, or they're 2 paragraphs away from the end, they just don't finish. Now, maybe that's because they're afraid of the next steps. Maybe it's because it took too long. Maybe because, more than likely, it wasn't as easy as they expected it to be. And if you are the sort of person who has an expectation that something is supposed to be easy because of privilege or previous experience or somebody telling you something a million times or whatever factor, if you are used to things being easy and you run into a thing that is not easy, it can absolutely bowl you over. Doesn't matter what these things are. If you are used to coasting somewhat on talent or charm or skill or whatever, and then all of a sudden you run into a thing where you're out of your comfort zone and all your old methods and all your old tools are suddenly failing you, it can be devastating. It can be absolutely weird and strange, sort of like watching a giraffe learn how to walk. Like you're just all limbs and you're trying to figure out where the ground is, and it's this strange, silly kind of locomotion. But the reality of it is, not everybody who wants to be a writer should be a writer. Not everybody who's going to start finishes, and frankly, not everybody who starts and finishes should keep doing it, because while it is okay for them to do it, it's not where they're going to be happiest. And they find more and more reasons to make more and more excuses and more expressions of frustration. And if frustration were fiction, they'd be the best-selling author of all time. A lot of writers really struggle because it's hard and because they're unwilling to do the hard things, and they're unwilling to change, and they're unwilling to learn, and they're unwilling to try again if they fail. And they carry around so much baggage and they make so many excuses that all they're doing time and time again is tying their own hands. And for those sorts of people, making their excuses, living in that space where they're unwilling to change and unwilling to grow and unwilling to let things go and got to tell you 5 different reasons about why you got to understand, they should not be writing. They can find other creative outlets for their stories, for their things. They can look at art. They can look at music. They can look at film. They can look at dance. They can look at painting. They can look at sculpture. They can look at sex work. They can look at poetry or free verse or just weird, strange other things I can't think of off the top of my head. But long form prose writing is not necessarily for them, because this is a craft. This is an expression of art, much like upper end painting, that takes time. and is a challenge on many levels, personal and collective, that requires skill, that starts off very small and increases and improves over time with both instruction and iteration. The more you do it and the better help you get while doing it, the better you get overall. And it's a slow process. And for a lot of people, they don't want to hear any of that. They don't want to hear that they're not good at a thing. They don't want to hear that they're, essentially stuck in the space they were 5 years ago, because they're unwilling to change the way they write, or they're unwilling to change what they read, or they're holding themselves back based on these outdated beliefs or thoughts they have, whether it's expectation or just philosophy or anything. They're in their own damn way, and they're unwilling to get out. In fact, they're unwilling to get out, and they're more than willing to entrench themselves deeper. So the greatest, hardest truth somebody has to grapple with is, maybe you shouldn't be a writer. And if your first thought at hearing that is, yeah, you're right, I would urge you not to quit, but to really seriously re-examine it. Why were you so quick to say no? It's not an indicator that you should do it, you should quit. It's an indicator as to, why are you so quick to jump to the negative first? Because maybe you are discounting large swaths of evidence that you're doing okay. Like, I know authors who have published multiple books who still wonder if they should be writing at all. But then I point to their sales and the fact that they've published books. They can do this. They know the process. They've been here before. This is not new territory. They just need to do it better, and they know how, and they can get better over time. Excuse me, but they're so eager to look for that negative and talk themselves out of that good thing that they hold themselves back. There are so many different ways of doing that, of tying your hands, getting your own way, stumbling over your own 2 feet, that it can be sad, frustrating for me, sad to watch, sad to experience as a reader. What if somebody you really like, who's, they produce great work, they suddenly stop? And it's not because they ran out of things to say. It's because they think they weren't talking to anybody. There's nothing worse than a writer who, stops themselves short of their success just because the signposts they were expecting aren't signposts that exist. I started streaming. I had this novel idea that 15 people would show up every night. That doesn't happen. For somebody who's unknown, who barely knew which way, to go with the microphone and how to deal with the camera, that's not going to happen. Maybe it'll happen in a year. Maybe it'll happen in 10 years. Who knows? But our expectations frame so much of our thinking, and our expectations and our sense of failure or negativity, or our sensitivity to those things, really give us a lens and a filter that get us in our own way. So the hardest truth, honestly, is whether or not they should be a writer at all. For the majority of people I know, it's a bone deep DNA level commitment. Yeah, I write. This is how I choose to express myself. This is how I feel most confident. This is how I feel creative. This satisfies me in some way, shape, or form. If it's scratching that itch, if it's doing those things, then you're on the right track. And then it's just a matter of aligning strategies and tools up with what you're doing to get where you want to go. But the hardest truth is, not everybody who is currently writing should be writing. And maybe that's you, and maybe that's me, and maybe that's that people over there, and maybe it's only them over there, but whatever. The hardest truth is whether or not you're committed to doing this. Commitment and passion are great and nearly everything, but underneath it, you still have to have the skill. And you can develop the skill and train it, but you still need the kernel. You'll still need the base package before we start adding the bells and whistles. And that comes with time. And that comes with getting out of your own way and being willing to be more of a learner than a knower, if that makes sense. What an incredibly deep and chewy question. I really, really appreciate it. Are there any other questions from anybody in chat? As I chug more water. Questions? Yes? No? Else we will go to the outro. Ooh. Shall we hit that outro? All right. We're going to the outro. If there are additional questions, fire away. We can always interrupt. You have a question, fire away. I'm ready. You just fire whenever. I'm going to drink more water. About how often do I see young writers struggling with the issue of whether or not they should be writing? Constantly. In part because schools don't prepare them for it. Schools give them an academic sense of equipment and then like a base and then get out of the way. And there are so many things in the world that erode rather than support, whether that's confidence or skill or whatever. And so many people, especially in like real creative filming spaces, look at the top 2% and say that's how I have to be in order to succeed, which is super not true. But I see young and I assume by young writers you're saying like young writers age-wise as opposed to young writers experientially, like writers who've only been writing X amount of months as opposed to like years. If you mean like kids and stuff, all the time. And it's discouraging because it's really like they're going to grow up and they're going to need to express themselves. And they are going to discount some avenues for that expression because social viable reasons dictate so. Like right now, they'll call it cringe, and then apparently that's bad. I'm not saying that automatically all writing is cringe, but the minute they toss that out there, it discounts whatever medium of expression that is. It's not bad to be cringe. It's part of life. Also, cringe is a value judgment. It's an opinion. It can be discounted because if it makes me happy and it's not hurting anybody, who gives a shit if you're uncomfortable with it? That's for you to rectify, not for me to stop doing. If you're talking about writers of little experience, new writers, because I don't like using adjectives of age to describe duration of writing. If you're talking about writers who are not far along in their writing journey, it's as constant. But that's mostly because given their ages, they're usually young adults or older, they're in more of a state of comparison. And there's more of a sense of competition. They've got to try harder. They've got to catch up. They've got to be as good as somebody else. They look and see all these books and all these deals and all the social media and all this hype. And they gotta do more and try more and go faster. And no, you just don't. You absolutely just don't need to do that. You need to figure out where you want to go, whatever it is, and figure out what tools you think will get you there. And use those tools. And then when it's, opportune and you're capable, acquire more tools, adjust your goal, adjust your rate of progress, and keep going. In this case, I meant young as in age. That's fine. I figured. But I totally appreciate you taking on both age and youth and experience. I'm always happy to. Always. Fun John fact. Now this is just going to appeal to the video people. The podcast people, you'll have to take my word on it. Anytime the questions from chat graphic is up and the camera isn't on me, my answers are like 10 times more detailed. I wonder why that is. Who knows? I think about that more and more. It was pointed out to me the other day. Yeah. Isn't that interesting? Any other questions, issues, etc.? Else we will go to the outro. Remember, we're streaming on 2 platforms, so this there will be a delay as this uploads to YouTube. When I just stream on YouTube, it goes straight up immediately. But because we're doing 2 platforms, there's that, I have to take the file and upload it. Lesson learned from last week. Shall we hit that outro? Cool? Yes? Awesome. We're going to the outro. If you have a question, just fire away. I just looked at the clock and I realized how many hours I've been talking. It's been almost 9 hours of straight talking. Wow. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for your wonderful detailed questions. I really appreciate it. Thanks for the chance to continue to stream on 2 platforms. This was sensational. I really hope you liked it. The next time I'll be right here in your ears and in your face and on your screens will be December the 14th. That's next Wednesday. I know after that, holidays are coming up for people, so we will adjust accordingly. Stay tuned to social media and newsletters if I need to tweak some dates, but by and large, I will see you on the 14th at 7 p.m. Eastern right here on both YouTube and Twitch. All power to all people. Take care of yourself. Remember that we can protect ourselves better than anybody else. Wash your hands. Take care of the people you love. Make sure you do good things and put good things out into the world. Always do your best. Always be kind. And remember to care about other people because they'll care about you. I love you all, and I'll talk to you very, very soon. See ya!